Finding little slider rolls can be a little bit difficult, but guess what isn't difficult? Making your own. Homemade brioche dough is one of the easiest doughs that you can make, and I'm gonna show you exactly how to do it. Welcome to The Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Some of you might be saying, wait a minute, I don't think making homemade rolls is simple. But guess what? It really is. And this recipe does not take that long. Most of the time is inactive time, meaning that you're not working with anything, you're just letting the dough sit and rest. So it is super easy, it is super delicious, and I know you will have so much fun if you make these slider buns at home. So let's get started on the ingredients. I'm gonna use a stand mixer. It makes it very easy. However, if you don't have a stand mixer, you're gonna do exactly the same thing that I'm doing in the stand mixer, but you're going to have to knead it by hand, okay? And you're gonna knead it a little bit longer. But the ingredients will go into your bowl exactly the same, okay? And I didn't even prep a whole lot of them because I really want to show you how little I worry about the ingredients, because we're not going by exact measurements here. We are going to go by the look and the feel of the dough. It's the easiest way to make bread dough, I promise you. All right, so I have all-purpose flour here. You can absolutely use bread flour. That will work fine. You just might need a little less or a little more liquid. Start off with 2 cups. This is gonna make 12 rolls, so it's gonna make a dozen slider buns, okay? They are about 1.5 ounces of dough a piece. If you wanted to make larger hamburger buns or even hot dog rolls, which you can from this dough, you can double the recipe if you wanna get more yield. So this will make a dozen small slider buns, okay? And they are about 2.5 to 3 inches in diameter. All right. Measuring the flour. Yes, you can measure it with a scale if you want. You can weigh it out. I don't worry about that. The most important thing when measuring out your flour is to aerate it first. What that means is go down into whatever container you're keeping your flour in and sort of fluff it up a little bit. Then we bring it out and take a leveler and level your flour. 1 cup going in. And do that for the 2nd cup. And yeah, I'm making a little bit of a mess. Usually I do this over a bowl, but not today. And 2 cups of flour. Now, if you ended up with 2¼ cups of flour, don't worry about it. We're gonna adjust that at the end with a little more liquid, so it's not gonna make any difference. If you're a little shy, you'll use a little less liquid, or maybe you'll add a little more flour at the end. So keep your flour close by, but we don't need that anymore. Just keep it close by in case we need to add a little bit, because this recipe goes by feel and look mostly. I have instant yeast. Instant yeast does not have to be proofed or bloomed beforehand. You don't have to mix it in water. You just dump it in with the flour, okay? I used to use active dry yeast all the time, where I would mix it in my little bowl and watch it become foamy, and I kind of liked using it. I like to see it come alive and everything. But this saves so much time. You get more consistent results and a quicker rise. Now, this is not a rapid rise instant yeast, but it does rise the dough a little bit faster because it's a smaller granule. You could also use a rapid rise or a bread machine yeast in this recipe. It's not gonna make any difference at all. Some recipes you don't want to interchange them because you want to develop the flavor of the dough in a longer proofing time, okay? So sometimes the rapid rise yeast isn't going to be okay. This recipe, the flavor's gonna come from the cream and the egg and the butter. We don't need to worry about it. We can make this a lot quicker of a process. All right, so the yeast is in. I'm gonna put 1 egg in. And the difference between brioche and a regular like lean bread is that it's enriched. And by enriched, that means we put in eggs, butter, and milk, okay? Then I'm gonna add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. That's fine grind sea salt. I found that was enough salt for the rolls, but if you like them a little bit saltier, you can certainly add a little bit more. I am using salted butter, 3 tablespoons of melted salted butter, so that adds a little bit of salt too. So if you're using unsalted butter, you might want to add another pinch of salt in there. All right, now we've got that mixture in. We'll lock our KitchenAid and go on a low speed to start to incorporate the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients. Now, flour will hydrate depending on how dry it is already, okay? So that's why sometimes you'll need more liquid, sometimes you'll need less liquid. It just depends. So I have 2/3 of a cup of whole milk here. And actually, I'll tell you a little secret, this is not whole milk because I didn't have any whole milk. This is actually 1/3 of a cup of cream and 1/3 of a cup of water. So you can use that, or you can use half and half, or you can use whole milk. You want a total of 2/3 of a cup. Now we're gonna start to put this in, and I like to put it right around the sides. Now, if you were doing this in a bowl, you would have some kind of a spoon or a spatula, and you would start to stir it together. So while that's starting to mix up, let me talk a little bit more about the yeast, because the instant yeast you can buy in bulk and it's very economical. You can keep it in the freezer, take it right from the freezer and use it to make your breads and any other yeast-based products that you want to make. So I just pop this right in my freezer and I leave it there. It will last for years. Okay, what I used in this recipe was equivalent to one of the packets of yeast that you get. You know, they usually come in 3 in a long packet. Each little packet has 2 1/4 teaspoons thereabout, and that's what I used in this recipe, 2 1/4 teaspoons, which is a considerable amount of yeast for the amount of flour that we have here, but it worked out beautifully in this recipe, so I left it alone. I did not decrease it or anything. So now we can see we've got a real dry, almost crumbly type of dough. That's not what we want. So we're gonna I put in about a half of the 2/3. So I put in about 1/3 of a cup in the beginning. And now I'm gonna let this dough tell me how much liquid it needs to be perfect. What I'm looking for is that as the dough hook pushes the dough around the mixer, it's gonna grab all the flour. There's still some flour down below, and there's some sticky stuff here on the sides. It's gonna grab all of that and incorporate, but I want the very base of the dough to sort of be sticking to the bowl of the mixer. That's when I know it's perfectly hydrated. That's the hydration I want for this recipe. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, so it just occurred to me that you might not know by looking if you need more flour or if you need more liquid. Now, hopefully maybe you saw that, but the way that this broke apart, this little piece broke right apart from this piece when I pulled it out. It just sort of broke apart. That tells me that we need a little more hydration. I can also feel the dough, and while it feels moist, it's not tacky, so it needs a little more hydration. So let's go ahead and go back on low. I'm gonna go ahead and put in all my liquid. And you're gonna see it become real sloppy looking. And that's okay. We just let it mix for a little bit. And I may need to add a little bit of flour, but we'll see. I made this recipe earlier today and I did not need to add anything, so we'll see. As the flour is absorbing that extra liquid that I just put in, you can see some changes starting to happen with the dough itself. This, I just keep letting it go, okay, for at least 5 minutes before I make a decision whether or not I need to add some flour. Because keep in mind, the flour is not going to instantly absorb all of the liquid. It takes a little bit of time, and the kneading helps to incorporate the liquid in with the flour. So just let it go. Don't make any decisions quite yet, okay? Now, my gut feeling is I'm gonna need about a tablespoon of flour, but we'll see. Time will tell. All right, so it's been about 4 minutes, and I can see where the dough is pulling away, but it's still sticking to a large area on the bottom now. So that's a little bit too wet of a dough for what we want. And one thing I'll share with you is I asked my mom one time, do you have a recipe for making bread? She's like, I don't use a recipe for making bread. I said, well, how do you know how much of what to put in? She said, you watch your dough hook, and you put in enough flour until it starts to rise up the dough hook. It just sticks to the bottom just a little bit. That works with almost all dough. So that is a great tip that I learned years and years ago from her. So now just start, don't put too much in, okay? Because this can go from perfect to dry in just, you know, a matter of a half of a tablespoon of flour. Now you can fix it because you can always add a little bit liquid, but we don't want to be chasing this. We want to get this dough perfect. And you might say, wait a minute, Louise, this doesn't seem easy for beginners, but it is. It is so easy because the only thing you need to do is look at your dough, feel your dough. You want your dough to be a little bit tacky and you want it to be sticking just at the very bottom. Now, if you're doing this by hand, you're not gonna have that dough hook, so you're not gonna have that gauge of it sticking right at the very base. So what you're gonna do is all go by feel. You want it to be nice and soft and supple and a little stretchy, but not sticking to your hands. Tacky, but not like sticky, okay? That's the feel that you want. Oh, we're getting really close. So I added a total of 1 tablespoon, and I can see it's pulling more away towards the center. I still have about this much though at the bottom that's sticking, and I want to decrease that to about this much, but I'm going to give it a little bit of time, okay, and see whether I need to add a little bit more flour. Our dough is climbing the dough hook and the base is definitely shrinking. We are almost there. I get so excited about this because I love the feel of this brioche dough. It is glorious to work with. And I know if you try it, you're gonna think the same. All right, we are almost there. So I added a total of 2 tablespoons of extra flour. And that could have happened for a couple reasons. I could have been a little heavy on my liquid measurements. I could have been a little light on my flour measurements. I doubt that the humidity's changed just from a couple of hours ago in my house, but who knows? Things change, things happen. That's why I don't go by strict measurements. I go by the look and the feel, and it looks like we are there now. Okay, I let it mix for another 3 minutes, and the base is a little bit wider than it was before. So I'm trying to make a decision whether or not I want to put another tablespoon or even half of a tablespoon of flour. So I'm just watching it right now. Let's give it a feel though. Let's see how it feels. It's a little stickier than what I would like, just a tad. So let's go ahead and add another half of a tablespoon of flour. Now, again, you might say, Louise, this is not easy, but it is, because if you get this part right, you're gonna make glorious buns, whether you make slider buns, full-size buns, loaves of bread. This is the important part, getting the dough right. So spend your time concentrating on the dough and everything else will fall into place, okay? All right, this is looking really good. So I probably kneaded this dough for a total of 10 to 12 minutes. And it feels good. It's a little tacky, but it's not super, super sticky. So it's not sticking totally to my hands or anything. Okay, now we're gonna get this dough out. It is smooth, it is soft, it is just a little tacky, but not sticking to my hands. This is perfect, okay? This is a perfect brioche dough. Now we want to proof it. Now you can actually stop the process here. You could wrap this in saran wrap and put it in the refrigerator if you wanted it to proof like overnight, a real cold proof, and then bring it out, let it rise, form your buns, and make them the next day. You can do that. But we're gonna do it all in one day because it doesn't take that long. So now I'm gonna use the Ninja Foodi to proof this. And I'm gonna get it done in probably about 30 to 40 minutes where it doubles in size. If you have the proof function on your oven, you can use that. You can also put this in a plastic bowl with maybe a little bit of olive oil or even melted butter, cover it with saran wrap and just leave it on your counter for about an hour, okay? And that'll be fine. If your house is really cold, that will slow down the proofing process. So never go by time, always go by the look of it. It's going to double in size. I am about ready to put this in and proof, but for those of you at home that are kneading this by hand, I wanted to just show you, first of all, when you get the dough consistency right, it's beautiful to knead. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like if I was kneading it by hand, okay? It is a glorious dough to work with. And you'll start off and it'll look like what I call craggly. Let me try to mimic craggly, okay? You'll start out looking like that. That's craggly. But as you work it and knead it, it is going to get really soft and really smooth, just like this one did, okay? So don't be afraid if you don't have a KitchenAid mixer. You can absolutely make this, okay? You're just gonna have to do a little bit of kneading by hand. If you have a bread machine, you can also let the bread machine do your work for you. So you can put the ingredients in and let the bread machine knead it, okay? But you're still gonna wanna look and make sure that you have the right amount of flour and the right amount of liquids in there and go by the look of the dough. So for this, we'll just put a little bit of olive oil down on the bottom, probably a teaspoon. You don't need a lot because there's already fat in this bread and it doesn't really stick. So that's a good thing too. It makes it easier to work with, doesn't it? All right, now we're gonna put this in and I like to take a visual, okay? So I look and see, all right, so it's up to about the 3-cup mark and I kind of just take just an eyeball because remember, I want it to double in size. And then we will select proof. I'll go up to 95. It really doesn't matter what temperature you go up to. You could stay on 90 or 95, but I usually just proof at 95. And then I'll go up to 45 minutes. That's usually what I set it for, just so it doesn't turn off if I'm busy doing something. Usually it takes somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes to double in size in the Ninja Foodi at 95 degrees. Now again, if you don't have the Ninja Foodi, just put it in a bowl with a little bit of oil, cover it with saran wrap, and put it in a warm area of your kitchen, okay? All right, it's been a little over 30 minutes and that's when I usually start looking to see, and this is definitely spread out more and it's risen up some. And I just do a little finger poke and that looks perfect. So what I look for is that a little indentation will go down into the dough, but it actually bounces back up kind of slowly. And I can tell that this is done. So now we can pull it out and you're deflating the dough back, okay? So we did our first rise. Now it is really nice and soft, a little warm, and we're ready to form our slider buns. So the difference between slider buns and regular hamburger buns or a brioche roll is simply the size, okay? So if you wanted to make 6 large or even 8 large hamburger buns, you can. You can even make hot dog rolls from this recipe if you wanted to, okay? And to make a hot dog roll, let me just show you real quick. Take about 3 ounces or so of the brioche dough. That's probably not quite enough. And flatten it out. Just like that, okay? So it looks like kind of a hot dog shape. Fold it in here. Fold it on this side in, and then fold the ends in. And it will look like that, and then you would let it double in size, and you'll have a hot dog roll, okay? So you can do that, or you can make large ones. But we're gonna make slider buns today. Sliders are like my favorite thing to serve at parties because you can make all these different fillings for them. So you could do little mini hamburgers, or you could do something that I love, which is a chicken bacon ranch mixture. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And you put that on the slider buns. It's really, really good. And I will definitely link to the recipe in the video description for that. Okay, so now we're gonna get 12 slider rolls. So the slider rolls are about 1.5 ounces of dough a piece. This recipe will make 12 of them. What I like to do, instead of worrying about measuring them out, which you certainly can, you can weigh them out is what I mean. You can weigh out 1.5 ounce balls and then go from there. But I don't worry about that. What I do is I take the dough And I basically eyeball it and break it in half, just like that. And then I kind of feel them. Do they feel? They feel pretty even. That's good. Okay, so each one of these is going to be 6 rolls. So again, I form a little ball just like that, and then cut that in half. See, yeah, that feels pretty good. Then what I do is I take the dough. This is just me. It's just what I do. Take the dough and I put it into almost like that hot dog shape, okay? And then I take a third of it, a third of it, and a third of it, okay? And that's how I get my dough balls. And they are pretty equal, okay? Not perfect, but good enough. So you're gonna do that for all of them. So we're gonna have 12 little dough balls here. You can see like this one looks a little bit bigger. You could give that one a little bit of that dough. And I'll do the same thing here. So once you have your 12 dough balls that are fairly similar in size, we're gonna get them shaped. There are a lot of different ways you can do this. You can shape them on the cutting board by kind of rolling around between the inside palm of your hand until you get a nice stretched top. We are creating tension on the top here that's going to give you a really nice brioche bun. Then you would flatten it down, okay, because we want them to be sliders. We don't want them to be tall dinner rolls. That's not what we're making. So then you flatten them down. That's one way to shape the dough. Sometimes I find that to be a little bit difficult with the smaller dough, you know, the smaller slider buns than a full-size bun. Shaping it on the cutting board is just a little bit more cumbersome. So what I usually do is I just do it in my hand and I flatten it out and I take the corners and I push and keep pushing and just keep like bending it over. So I'm still creating that same tension on the top. You'll see it go real smooth. And that's when you know you've got good tension. And then I just tuck it underneath and flatten it out. Okay, now another difference between making a dinner roll or making a slider bun, and this will depend on your preference, okay? So this is totally up to you. If you want a harder roll or a harder bun, you're gonna space them out further apart so they don't touch each other. With slider buns, I like to keep them a little bit softer. We don't want a hard, really hard, crunchy exterior like you would with a French bread, right? So you keep them closer together. What's gonna happen as these do their second rise, they're gonna almost meet. Sometimes they will meet, sometimes they don't exactly meet, but by having them closer together, they create steam and they keep the dough a little bit softer. So you're not gonna have a real hard, crunchy roll, okay? Now, if you want them really crunchy, then you can certainly keep them apart. That's perfectly fine. All right, so do that for the rest of the dough balls. And I'm gonna be cooking these 2 different ways, okay? Because I'm gonna cook some in the Ninja Foodi for those of you who love to use your Ninja Foodi and wanna make them in there. And I'm gonna do some in the oven for those of you who do not have a Ninja Foodi. So you can see that they turn out beautiful either way. So for the ones that I'm gonna bake in the Ninja Foodi, I'm gonna use the all-purpose pan. You could use any pan or any flat surface that you wanted to. I just happen to have this handy. It worked beautifully, so I'm gonna keep using it. But an 8x2 Fat Daddy-O would work as well. Now you might wonder, why do you have parchment on one tray and not on the other? Well, basically it's a habit. I almost always seem to line these trays with parchment paper, but I don't line this one with parchment paper. I've never had any issues with them sticking, so I think you're good to go. I even think you could keep this not lined if you wanted to, and you'd be fine. All right, so the first one, put it straight in the middle, okay? And then you wanna place the other 5 around the one that's in the center and leave about a 1/2 of an inch or so, okay? Space between that. All right, one other thing I wanted to tell you is if you wanted to make tall dinner rolls, you can do that. Just don't flatten them out. So get that tension on the top, just like I showed you, and then just put them in as little balls, put them close together. That will help them rise up so you'll have nice tall dinner rolls, okay? So you can turn this brioche recipe into a dinner roll as well. All right, now they have to proof again for another 30 minutes or so. So what I'll do is put it back in the Foodi. So I'll just grab my rack here. I don't need to cover it when it goes into the Foodi, which I absolutely love this feature. The proof feature does not use the fan, so it doesn't circulate any air, so it doesn't dry out the rolls. It works beautifully. 30 minutes is perfectly fine. Usually they're ready in about 25 minutes or so. They're ready to go into the oven. Now with these, I can do one or two things. I can just cover them with some saran wrap and leave them right on my counter and let them proof, or I could use the proofing function on my oven. For this, I'm just gonna leave them right on the counter, okay? So just loosely cover with a little bit of saran wrap. And that's it. And then we wait another 20 to 30 minutes until they do puff up some. They don't have to double in size, but they will rise up a little bit, and then we'll be ready to preheat and get them in the oven to bake. And guess what? I realized when I was making up this perfect brioche dough, I forgot to add sugar. I usually add 1 tablespoon of sugar to the dough, but I completely forgot. And guess what? It's perfectly fine. This dough is going to be lovely and the rolls are going to taste delicious. So it does not matter. If you see the tablespoon of sugar in the written recipe on my website and you're thinking, Louise, I didn't see you add that on your video. I just forgot. So you can add in the tablespoon of sugar or you can leave it out. It's totally up to you. I will taste these and taste the ones I made with sugar and let you know which one tastes better, but really it's an optional ingredient. All right, now it's time to grab these out, and you'll see that they've just risen a little bit. That's perfectly fine because we're gonna preheat now. So they're gonna sit here for another 10 minutes while we preheat the Ninja Foodi or you preheat your oven. If you notice, I'm not even worried about cleaning out the bottom. There's a little oil in there. It's not gonna make any difference whatsoever. So go ahead and set your Ninja Foodi to the bake function. You want the temperature to be 350. And the time is going to be 25 minutes. We're going to do a 10-minute preheat. And then I like to have 15 minutes on the clock, so to speak, for the rolls. But really, they only take about 10 minutes to cook. Okay, hit start. And I'm going to preheat the oven. If you're using a regular wall oven, you're going to preheat to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so we have preheated for a full 10 minutes. And now it is time to bake up our slider buns. So just put them right in there and close the lid. Now with these, I'm gonna go ahead and put the egg wash on and put some sesame seeds on top. This is 1 beaten egg with about a tablespoon of water. That's what I like to thin it out with, is just a little bit of water. You could also thin it out with a little bit of milk if you wanted to. Now when you're putting sesame seeds on top of bread or a roll or anything like that, you want to make sure that they are not toasted. They're going to toast up in the oven. Now we'll pop these in and it'll take somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes. Between 8 and 10 minutes into the cooking cycle, I like to take a look at them. So let's go ahead and do that now. Oh, they're looking really pretty. So they've risen up. They look like little slider buns, so that's a good thing, right? Now, what I like to do is brush them with just a little bit of butter. You can either do this right now or you can do it at the very end. I do it both. I think the butter is going to help them brown up even more, and they're going to be beautiful. But putting the butter on after you remove them from the heat also softens that crust and creates a nice glossy finish. But I happen to love butter, so I do it about 2 minutes before they're done and right when they're done, okay? Now, that's if I don't egg wash. The ones that I have in the oven that I egg washed, I will only put the butter on after they come out. And that's really optional. If you are not sure whether your bread or rolls are done, you can use your instant read thermometer to check an internal temperature. Okay, now I try not to go straight down in the middle like that because you're gonna have a hole in your roll, but I'll go right in here, and if it is over 200 degrees, which these are, then they are done. Okay, now you could go a little bit longer. You're not gonna overcook them or dry them out or anything. You could go a little bit longer if you wanted to. If you wanted to get a little more browning, you could bump up the heat if you wanted to get them a little bit darker. But honestly, I think they look pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the Ninja Foodi off, pull them out, brush a little more butter on there, and then get them on our cooling rack. The ones in the oven are gonna take a little bit longer because it's a larger space. So those are still cooking. They're just now starting to brown up. Oh my gosh, so good. So the upside of using the Ninja Foodi is, number one, the proof feature. I think that's really great. Number two, they get done a little bit faster. But the downside is you can only really make 6 at a time, right? We're limited in space here, so. And in the oven, you can make all 12 or even double, make 24 all at once. So how you decide to cook them is completely up to you, but I really hope you give this recipe a try because even if you're not a bread maker, I have a feeling that this might change your mind. Oh my gosh, they look amazing. They look perfect. Absolutely perfect. Oh gosh. Look. Oh my gosh, these are perfect sliders. Or I guess I should say the buns for the sliders. Oops. And look, the bottom's even nice and, I would say tan in color. Now remember, these are not hard and crunchy roll. We don't want them to be. Oh, they look so pretty. All right, let's wait for the oven ones and then we'll pull those out. Let them cool for a good 10 minutes before you open them up, okay? Because that's gonna finish cooking the inside and just set everything up, and then you're gonna have a really nice slider bun. All right, so they're out of the oven now. They look beautiful, but they didn't brown as much as my batch earlier today. And guess why? I bet you it's that sugar I forgot. Honestly, you know, sugar encourages browning, even though it was just a 1 tablespoon in the dough. So, still optional ingredient, though we are gonna do a taste test. They still look beautiful. I mean, I have no complaints about the way that they look at all. But even the ones with the egg wash, like you can see. So these were done in the oven with an egg wash. This was done in the Foodi with an egg wash. Same temperature, same recipe, except for that sugar. Isn't that interesting? Same preheat time. So really nothing else changed except I did not remember to put in the sugar. Whoops. Seems like I want to drop 1 of each kind of roll, and that's fine. All right. And let me show you. Now this was the oven one from the previous batch, and this is the Foodi one, okay? Still a little lighter. Really interesting, all because of sugar. But you know, sugar does encourage browning, so it makes sense, right? All right, I've got to let them cool down just a little bit, and then I'm gonna give them a taste, and I'll taste the ones that I did earlier with the sugar and the ones without the sugar, and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, we have Ninja Foodi egg wash sesame seeds with sugar. We have Ninja Foodi no sesame seeds butter wash, which I happen to love, and no sugar in this one. Sugar in this one, no sugar in this one. These two are the oven sesame seed with the egg wash, no sugar. This is plain with a butter wash at the end, and that has the sugar in it. So let's see. Okay. The texture's beautiful, okay? So these are you're gonna use a serrated knife to split them, especially if you're gonna serve them like beside a whole bunch of different fillings. You know, like you could do pulled pork, beef brisket, you know, all kinds of things. Have them already split. Just use a serrated knife to cut them. But the inside is wonderful. Oh my gosh. That is so good. I happen to love the sesame seeds. Oh my gosh. Delicious. Okay. Ninja Foodi. Beautiful. Wow. These are still warm. No sugar. Let's see. Wow. That's really good. That is so interesting. I think I like this one better without the sugar. Isn't that interesting? Okay, sugar, oven. Oh my goodness. That is a really great texture. Now, as far as the texture between these two, the oven wins out. So good. Okay, this is the new one we made. Oh, wow. I'm really liking the texture inside here. Wow. I can't tell the difference with sugar or without at all. They are all amazing. They are all like perfect for sliders. They have the perfect texture. I don't know why these two I prefer, and they're the ones without the sugar. But I do, I just like them a little bit better. Maybe I'm getting a little bit saltier of a taste, I'm not sure. But anyway, they're all delicious. Sugar or no sugar, don't worry about it. But there is a visible difference in the browning, and that is the only difference between these two batches. So whichever way you wanna make your brioche slider buns, you certainly can, but make them, even if you've never made bread before in your life. Make this dough, take your time, make sure it is the right texture, feel, look, everything, and then you are gonna bake up some beautiful buns.